All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Log4Shell Protect Your Assets. Today is a beautiful February 10th, 2022, and I am extremely blessed to have our IT operations teams, our vulnerability analyst, and of course myself around the security incident response side of things. We're going to go ahead and get started with our team Log4j. For today's initial discussion, we'll have Ms. Lauren Miller, our senior solutions consultant in the ITOM space, go through our CMDB query and parry. Next, we'll have Mr. Nazer go through the security solutions around our security operations offering for vulnerability response. And last but certainly not least, myself, Chris Walker, the solution consultant around security operations, will be tackling the Mitre Fighter framework experience, as well as our newest offering around major security incident management. Now, our power play agenda for today's topic, we are going to start with ITOM around the initial ingestion, specific tables we use within the CMDB, and of course, how we query that change management database to identify specific Log4Shell versions. From there, we'll go into the vulnerability side of things. Nazer is going to walk us through an incredible experience that will educate us around how we can create these vulnerability alerts, prioritize compromised assets, and of course, manage the remediation efforts through security task delegations. And our final topic of discussion here will bring everything into the closure of our end-to-end solution for security incident response. This is going to be going through our Mitre attack framework, giving you a little bit more around some of the enhancements and tactics, techniques, and procedures. And last but not least, our major security incident response, the virtual war room. I'm very excited for all three of these topics. Let's go ahead and get after it. So with that, we are going to convene with our query and parry Log4j versions in the CMDB. Miss Lauren Miller, please take the microphone from me and take it away.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Will you let me know when that comes up for you?
Looking good.
Perfect. So, hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. As Chris mentioned, my name is Lauren Miller. I'm a solutions consultant here at ServiceNow, and I specialize in IT operations management. So specifically everything that pertains to the CMDB, getting your data populated into the CMDB. And that is very relevant to our first topic today, which is getting that visibility into your Log4j versions across your networks, whether it's in the cloud, on-prem. We're going to talk about how our discovery actually populates that Log4j information into your CMDB. And then I'll show you a demonstration about how to actually query that data so you can have that visibility to it. So just jumping right in here, I have a few quick slides before we switch over to my instance. So I want to first start out with how does this information actually get populated from your networks, from your servers and devices back into the ServiceNow CMDB. So first up is our Agentless Discovery. And if you're not too familiar with how our Agentless Discovery works, we have lots of other content available to kind of break that down for you. But for the focus of today's presentation, we have two forms of Log4j that we're going to start with on this slide. So Log4j is tricky, right? Sometimes it can be found within a running process. Sometimes it can be found within a jar file of an application. And sometimes it can show up as just a software that's installed directly on the operating system. So we need visibility to it to make sure we can remediate accordingly, regardless of which form it might be in. So we'll address each of those and how discovery populates it, regardless of form, and then how to query. So starting out with that, as I mentioned, that agentless discovery. So as your discovery schedules are running across your networks, whether it's on-prem in the cloud, as part of that discovery schedule by default, there is a phase of discovery called the exploration phase. And as part of that phase, there's a probe that kicks off to actually detect running processes and pull those running processes back into the CMDB as an attribute of your server or of your device that you are querying. So out of the box, default agentless discovery, those running processes are already being pulled in. So we'll show you how to query that specific running process table, where that data lands in the CMDB, and then how to query those running processes that may contain Log4j. You know, if the Log4j is running as a library or maybe as part of a Java process. So we'll talk about that more in depth, but discovery is pulling that in. And on the other side of that, as I mentioned, sometimes Log4j can be within a jar file. And so as part of agentless discovery as well, if you are entitled today, excuse me, if you're entitled today to discovery within ITOM, you're also entitled to what we call file-based discovery. However, unlike the running process part, it is a separate plugin that needs to be requested. As you can see on the screen here, we have a screenshot of it. You need to go ahead and request that specific plugin if you have not already and activate it within your instance, your ServiceNow instance. We have pretty extensive documentation about how to actually go ahead and configure that as part of your discovery module. But again, no extra charge if you're already entitled to ITOM Discovery. It's just a separate module that has to be requested and configured. Now, if you've already done that, or once you activate that file-based discovery module, that's what's going to start pulling in as part of your discovery schedules, that list of file signatures, and actually process those file signatures so we can see existing software that may be installed on those devices, or a list of unregistered software products. And we're going to be able to then query those files for any jar files that may contain log4j. And we'll walk through actually where that data lands, similar to how we'll look at the running process table, where the file data goes in ServiceNow, and then how to query those files for any that may contain log4j. So Agentless Discovery is pulling in the running processes. Once you have this plugin for file-based discovery ready to go, it'll start pulling in those jar files, which we will query in a moment. And then on the other side of discovery, we talked about agentless, and then our alternative to that is our agent-based discovery using our ServiceNow Agent Client Collector. So the ACC, Agent Client Collector, it's really a multi-case agent. And so we release use cases for it in the ServiceNow store. And we just actually this month, a couple of days ago, released a new one that's very relevant to this topic today. It's the Agent Client Collector for Security Incident Response. And it's actually, you can see the link below. It was just released to the ServiceNow store as of this month. So you can go take a look at what it's talking about, and install it into your instance if you have the correct licensing for it. But really what this is doing, and again, we have documentation on what the agent does at a high level, but this specific use case for the Agent Client Collector is really enabling your security agents to run OS query against the device where the agent might be installed. And so you can really create very specific queries, right, specifically for log4j to pull in the exact data that you need. And it's going to pull that data back and actually load it as a work note within the security incident. So this is really enabling our security analysts to do a quick query on a specific device where the agent is installed and get that data pulled back to the workspace that's at hand, which is a security incident, which we'll be talking more about in the later part of the presentation. So I won't spend too much here, but given this is a very new release, I want to make you aware of it. As I mentioned, it's available in the store, and we'll be releasing lots more videos and information about this capability specifically. So we've covered how either, using agentless discovery or agent-based discovery, how we actually pull this log4j relevant data back into the ServiceNow CMDB, kind of automating that flow from your networks, from your servers back into the CMDB. Now I want to talk about with this last slide here, where this data actually lands respectively. And again, we'll be sending out these slides so you have the exact table names that you'll need to query on your own. But these are the tables we're going to be querying in just a moment. So that first one I mentioned, those running processes that may have log4j running as a library or part of a different Java process, that's going to land in the running process table as discovery is pulling those in. That file-based discovery, once that's enabled in your instance, is going to start pulling in those jar files, and those are going to land in the file information table, which we'll also be querying. And then lastly, as I mentioned, whether you're using agent-based or agentless discovery, we're also able to pull in our general installed software data from our servers, from our devices, and pull that back into ServiceNow. So as I mentioned, sometimes log4j can appear if it's directly installed on the OS, or for some reason it may present as a general software versus as a file or part of a process. So just to make sure we're maxing out our visibility here, we want to query all these tables to make sure we have full visibility of where log4j may be within our networks, within our environments. So the reason I have two general software tables listed here that we may want to check in addition to the file-based and running process table is for that reason, if log4j is appearing directly on the OS. And so the big difference in why I have two listed here is really has to do is if you have software asset management installed within your ServiceNow instance. So if you have any software asset management modules installed in your environment, your ServiceNow instance, that software data, that general software data is actually going to reroute to a SAM specific software installation table. So if you're not sure, you can certainly query both tables, work with your ServiceNow admins to make sure you understand exactly what you have installed and which table may be relevant for you. Versus in my case today, I do not have any SAM modules installed on my instance, so we'll be working with this first general software table here. And with that, I'm going to move us over to my ServiceNow environment. And we're actually going to walk through how to query each of those 3 tables and put them together in a single pane of glass view, so you can have near real-time visibility to your Log4j data as it's being discovered and pulled into the ServiceNow CMDB. Now, there's a couple of different ways to actually query the CMDB. In some of our other Log4j YouTube videos, you may have seen us use the CMDB Query Builder, which is a great tool to leverage. You can search directly on those tables. But today, given we have multiple tables to search, I'm going to be building out reports and then putting those together within a dashboard, which is really easy and quick to do. And I will walk you through that now. So the first report we're going to build is for our running process table, that first one I discussed that contains Log4j. Our source type is going to be that running process table. So we'll go ahead and search for that specific table here. And again, the tables will be listed on that slide we just saw. And you can make these reports as fancy or as beautiful as you'd like. For the sake of today's presentation, the only next step I'm going to do is, now that I have my running process results populated here that Discovery is pulling in, I'm going to go ahead and add a filter to it. For this particular table, we're going to use the parameters field for the running processes, contains, and then Log4j. Now I'm going to go ahead and run that filter to make sure it's working. I will save my report, and then as I actually click into one of these results, these configuration items that the filter told me contains Log4j, and I do a quick Control F for Log4j, I can see within the parameters of this particular running process that Log4j is mentioned within those parameters, and therefore it's going to be listed within the results that I need to see for visibility's sake. Now you can, of course, add additional filters to filter by versions or any other fields that are relevant to that table. I pull up a couple of those now. For the sake of time, we just built that running process report. All we did was add that table, add that filter. For the sake of time, I've already built out the other 2 for the file-based discovery, that file table and the general software table, but I'll click into each of these so you can see how we did that. So repeating that same process we just did for the running process table, I've repeated it for file-based discovery, using the data source to be that file information table. And similar to the last step, all I did was add that filter. In this case, name of the file contains Log4j. And at the bottom here, once I ran that filter, you can see in my instance, any file-based results that came back based on my environment that have a file containing Log4j in the name, and the device it is installed on, as well as the version for me to filter further on if needed. And going back to that last report that's relevant for us today, that last table, that general software table, again, it may be a different table if you have SAM modules installed. But in my environment, I leverage that general software table, as you can see here. And then just like the last 2 steps, I added that filter, name contains Log4j. And you can see the results that were pulled in if Log4j was detected directly on the operating system. So now we have all 3 of those reports. The last step we're going to do is we want this in a single pane of glass view. So I've gone over to my dashboards module here. I'm going to create a new dashboard, discovered Log4j. And I'm going to add our reports as the widgets that we just created. I can search here for Log4j, and then I can add in those reports one by one, those 3 that we just created very quickly. We have the software table, file-based discovery table, and the running process table that we created that report for together. And so now in a matter of minutes, I've created this dashboard, right, that has queries of all 3 of those relevant tables that may contain Log4j. It's filtered, and as discovery continues to run, whether it's agent-based, agentless, as those discovery schedules are running, pulling in new relevant data based on the filters we've set here, this dashboard is going to update with that data across these tables. And most importantly, right, rather than just seeing the running process of Log4j, the files of Log4j, we can see the exact devices, servers that have those versions of Log4j installed on them and may need to be remediated accordingly. So with that, we've gotten a lot more visibility in a single pane of glass view to our tables that contain Log4j within ServiceNow CMDB. And I'm going to stop sharing at this point and pass it over to Nasser to talk us through remediation.
So much, Lauren. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Looks good.
Perfect. So hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm going to be walking you over how to detect Log4j vulnerability system with vulnerability response, which is part of the security operations offering within ServiceNow platform. Starting off with how we actually get the information into the platform and how we get to prioritizing the different vulnerability information. So as you can see, the first step is we actually rely on integrating with the third-party vulnerability scanners that you might already be familiar with. For example, here you can see on my screen, we have some of the logos that we can integrate with, like Qualys, Rapid7, Tripwire, Tenable, etc. After we receive all of that information from the vulnerability scanner, we can automatically prioritize using business threats and risk context. So one of the benefits of having IT operation management and vulnerability response working together is that we can actually rely on the information within the CMDB to actually understand which one of your assets are more important and which one are critical. On top of that, we can perform specific risk assessment that can be sent to the appropriate individual that help us understand that information more. Keeping all of that in mind, we have the prioritization for all of the different assets that can be vulnerable to different vulnerabilities, whether that was Log4j in this example, or any other vulnerabilities that exist, or in the future, if there are any zero-day vulnerabilities that no one is aware of. After we prioritize the different vulnerabilities within these assets, we actually automate the assignment and triage. So based on the kind of vulnerability it is, and based on the platform that hosts that vulnerability, we're able to leverage that information into assigning it to the appropriate team or individual who have the appropriate skill that is needed to patch or take care of a vulnerability of that nature. We also can leverage information that is available on third parties like the Mitre attack, which Chris is going to walk us through, into understanding what is that vulnerability exactly and whether if that vulnerability is part of a major tactic that we also should be aware of. We can also, utilizing the vulnerability response solution, coordinate the different change that is needed for the patchment of the vulnerabilities, or in the rare occasion where a vulnerability patch is not available or we're just waiting for a maintenance window, we can also coordinate the exceptions and deferral within the platform itself. And after we hopefully patch the vulnerability successfully, we're going to rely on the automation of the vulnerability scanners to confirm that the vulnerabilities have been patched successfully. Following an ITIL format, we just want to make sure that no work has been left undone and the vulnerability has been successfully patched in the environment. Now, in the case of Log4j, we want to make sure and see whether we are actually going to have that vulnerability within our environment. So to do so, we actually have the manager workspace that allows us to create specific watch topics. These watch topics are looking for criteria within our environment that can alert us to the existence of a specific vulnerability. So as you can see here, we have the Log4j vulnerability watch list already created, which allows us to see how many assets or CIs we have that have that specific vulnerability, and also allows us to delegate the different remediation tasks to the appropriate teams. Now, I'm just going to pause my screen for a second to move on to the ServiceNow instance to actually demonstrate how that solution looks like. So over here, we have the vulnerability management workspace. As you can see, I have a bunch of different watch topics. These watch topics basically have different criteria that the manager had thought that these are important to keep track of. So for example, we have critical overdue vulnerabilities, vulnerabilities within the Linux system, or the Log4Shell vulnerability. Now, to create a remediation test is very simple. We simply just click on here, associate it with a name and description, and assign the criteria that we would like to follow for that vulnerability to be detected and assigned to the appropriate team. So are we looking for a specific CI? Are we looking for a specific file? Are we just looking for maybe an operating system that is going to be assigned to the appropriate team that handles vulnerabilities on such operating system? So in the Log4j vulnerability over here in the watch topic, you can see that we are getting an overview of how many vulnerable items we have, VIs and remediation efforts, active remediation efforts, etc. We can actually dig deep to see how many vulnerable CIs that have this specific vulnerability, or how many distinct vulnerabilities within the watch topic that we've created. On top of that, we have a full-on list of all of the different vulnerable items that have the criteria turned on. So another example would be the critical overdue, which has just a bunch more data. So we can see an overview in the vulnerable CIs and the vulnerable items. So the platform is definitely taking advantage of the different queries that we created within ITOM or our CMDB into generating this report. Now, how this would look like from an IT analyst or a vulnerability engineer individual who was assigned these vulnerabilities. So over here, we have switched to the IT Analyst Workspace, where a specific analyst is just looking at the different assignment tasks that are associated with the vulnerabilities that have been assigned to their group. They can definitely filter that to just look at the ones that are assigned to them individually, or in this case, just the general group. Clicking on any of them will just present us with more information about that vulnerability. Like, for example, the remediation process. Over here, it looks like we are 87.5% complete. More information about the vulnerability is presented to us over here. If we want that in a greater view, we can just click on the details, which allows us to look at that vulnerability detail, or look into even the third-party integrations that we have with National Vulnerability Database or the Common Weakness Enumeration List, just to get more information about that vulnerability and what exactly means if we have this vulnerability in our records. Now, if there are any preferred solutions or solutions that we have created that helps us remediate specific vulnerabilities, these are automatically going to be generated here on the solution tab, or we can just have potential solutions where we are basically just looking for specific keywords that could potentially help us in patching the vulnerabilities that we have at hand. And on top of here, we have just a bunch of different UI action that makes it easier for the analyst to do their job. Like, for example, if I want to change the assignment to me, I can just assign this remediation task to me. If based on my investigation, I've decided that this is a false positive, I can just go ahead and mark it as a false positive, which closes out the record for me. I can create a change and coordinate that if I'm working on patching this vulnerability. If this is a major task and I would like to split it among my different team members, I can split that task from here. Or if I need to request an exception due to the fact that there is no vendor fix, or because we're just waiting for a maintenance window, I can just go ahead and request that exception, which allows me to give out a reason, a date until this exception is going to be valid for, and additional comments. Now, of course, based on the reason, we can utilize specific workflows that are going to either automatically approve, decline, or maybe send it to a third-party individual who's going to be able to audit the specific exception and see if it's valid or not. Now, if we have successfully patched the vulnerability, we can just click on resolve, which allows us to maybe build a workflow that by simply clicking on resolve, we are also initiating another scan that can look into the assets that we have and check whether we have successfully patched the vulnerability that we have on hand. Now, with that, I'm going to be passing it to Chris, where he is going to be walking us on the security incident response portion of how we can handle vulnerabilities of the nature like Log4j. Thank you, everyone.
Incredible. Lauren, Nazer, thank you so much. I have chills and goosebumps. I am so excited for all of these offerings on the ITOM side, as well as the vulnerability response side. Let's go ahead and get after it, guys. I'm going to go ahead and get into our Mitre attack framework, as well as our major security incident management. All right. Excellent. So as part of today's discussion, we want to wrap this up with our end-to-end solution around the Mitre attack framework and the major security incident management offering. This is our new virtual war room, which we will actually go through step by step on how we can propose a security incident and promote it to a major security incident record, which will then give you that full collaborative overview and detailed scope around how we can start to really go into much of a deep dive with our Microsoft Teams as well as SharePoint collaboration. Now, we're going to take a look really quickly here on this one slide, and I swear we'll get right into the solutions here. For the purposes of the time, we want to make sure we understand what Mitre and major security incident response is. First and foremost, our Mitre attack offering framework here. This is going to be a knowledge base of your common techniques, tactics, and procedures, right? The TTP. So your organization can access all this information to develop specific threat models and methodologies against cyber attacks. Now, as part of this overview, we're going to be going through the various adversarial techniques that are used during different stages of that cyber attack. So as you can see here, we have the full methodology around how Mitre attack can go through ingesting through your threat intelligence third-party tools. And by leveraging this, we can actually go through preloading this information through a service such as Taxi Client Connect. Through that Taxi server, we're ingesting the data that collects through threat intelligence. And then from there, existing security information and event management systems such as Splunk or even IBM QRadar can automatically ingest that threat data. So that's your alerts and any evidential context around specific incidents. We're going to go ahead and pre-populate that information. And from here, we're going to then propose your IOCs or your indicators of compromise, which is going to automatically be associated with that security incident. Now, as part of that security incident, we're going to feed those threats for relevant information and sending that information to those third-party sources, such as EDR Sandbox or TIP for additional threat analysis. Now, we bring everything back into that full spectrum, as we mentioned before, right? All of this comes back into the correlation and how we assess our vulnerabilities around the exposures through vulnerability response. So as Nazer pointed out, that full remediation effort, but also enriching the data through Lauren's discussion around the CMDB. We want to make sure that this information is relevant, useful, and consistent throughout the entire process as we go through this end-to-end solution to then ingest those alerts and then create our major security incident record. This is going to be the core of the framework as part of that matrix around those adversary techniques and tactics, I should say. And of course, that sequence is going to give us all the tactics that we need to represent and accomplish this particular state of the incident. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my other screen here. And we're going to go and get into our demonstration. Excellent. Here we go. All right. So how do we become a Mitre firefighter? I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that we can start to leverage the Mitre attack framework to map your technique detection coverage with specific technique IDs. That's going to enable your organization to detect specific adversary techniques throughout your instance. Now, what we're looking at here is our Mitre attack overview. Here we can see relevant techniques around security incidents that have been linked. We can also see our security incidents by Mitre attack tactics, and of course, our critical assets, and then a security incident close code versus Mitre attack techniques, giving you a little bit more insight on what's currently opened, investigated, mitigated, and patched, as well as your false positives. Now, we're going to go ahead and dive right into our security incident count here for anything that has a technique tied to it. So when we drill into this, we can see we have a security incident record that is already opened for an application or system exploitation. Of course, the name of the game here today is Log4Shell. So how do we leverage this technique detection? For example, if someone is attacking your organization with Log4Shell exposures, well, we're going to see how the coverage of that can be detected through this particular security incident. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my security incident record. Here we can see that the SIM did its job. We've gone ahead and pre-populated all of our information, and our source was from our SIM. In this case, this could be from Splunk or IBM QRadar or other popular SIM tools. We've gone ahead and added our short description here. And as you can see, as I scroll to the bottom, we now have the capability to associate a Mitre attack technique. Now, this technique will include an ID that's populated from those collections I mentioned before. So as long as you have your populated collections and techniques that are activated, for example, through Taxi, this is going to then allow you to associate specific techniques that are mapped to the specific source. Now, in this case, we have multiple sources here. For the purposes of the demonstration, obviously, we're going to be selecting our enterprise attack framework because this is a global widespread organizational issue. So we want to make sure we have the right tactics as well as the right techniques associated to this specific security incident. Here I've gone ahead and populated some of those fields, but of course, this is a live demonstration. So I do want to show you some other tactics that we could also add to this specific security incident record. Now we'll go into the tactic selection here in our dropdown. We can see have our most common tactics as part of the enterprise attack framework in Mitre. So if we wanted to go through and add an additional tactic here around credential access, you can see here we've already pre-populated this information. So it's just a matter of figuring out which specific technique is going to adhere to this particular exposure. In this case, we're looking at Log4Shell. So we can look at how we enrich this further around the Mitre attack techniques, and then we can create that technique ID, which will then be surfaced within our Mitre attack framework as well as our heat map. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And now we see that this has been associated with our security incident record. Now, how do we see that? Well, let me show you. When you go into the Mitre attack card within your security incident, I can now show the IDs as well as the techniques that are associated to those adversaries. In this case, we have initial access, we have compromised software dependencies and development tools that are tied to Log4Shell, privilege escalation, right? Here is our ID, T1068, our command and control for remote access execution around software, and then the impact, right? This is an exploitation. All of these relevant IDs are now enriching this security incident, which can now be used when we go through our major security incident management protocol. Now that we have all this relevant information within our security incident, we can also see at the bottom here, our relatable vulnerable items. So the vulnerable item has already been attached. Again, this was detected through the start of our initiation of this particular conversation. We started with the CMDB, we queried those versions. From Lauren's perspective, we were understanding what exists out in the threat landscape. From there, we went to Nazer. Nazer went through as the vulnerability analyst, giving us information around vulnerable items and detecting those informations and how we would remediate it. We can see this has been attached to this specific record. Now, growing into the vulnerable item, we can actually see all of the relevant information. We have a vulnerability, right? My next tattoo, 2021-4428, I survived. Log4j. We now have our vulnerability group. This is going to be a patch for the affected asset. We can see this is associated to our security incident, as we've shown here. And we know the configuration item, again, taking this information from the CMDB, is identified as Dennis's IBM desktop computer. So now we have all this relevant information. What do we do with it now, right? Because we have vulnerability response, we can import the Mitre taxi collections to now view our CVEs within our environment and their relationship with the associated Mitre attack techniques. So what we're going to do now is take a look at how we detect that through coverage mappings. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that specific ID, the 1068, looks like. And as you can see here, through that taxi collection through Mitre attack, it has identified the technique ID. We have our technique associated, and it's given us an overall technique detection coverage of excellent with the comment of our Log4Shell information. So as you can see, this is exactly what the job is being done here. This is all of the information we need. We want to execute an exciting experience, but also an educational one that is giving us more security posture and confidence in the data that is ingested. So now we can improve on the data decision make where we go into our Mitre attack heat maps. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with our Mitre attack heat maps, of course, this is available for everyone. This is obviously available on the Mitre attack framework on their website, but we do this systematically to give you the insights you need to understand how the data is being leveraged and the relationships associated with those specific techniques. Now that we've created the association with the CVE and those specific attack patterns, here we can actually leverage our filters. Now I have this filtered for an old filter around solar winds. I'm going to go ahead and clear out and restore our default filters. And I'm going to go ahead and analyze a specific security incident. Now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and copy this particular security incident number. And we're actually going to look at this in our Mitre attack heat map. So this is all here live in real time. We'll hit apply. And this is going to bring up those common techniques, tactics, and procedures. As we can see here through that exploitation, the compromised software dependencies, our remote access software technique, as well as our application system exploitations, we can see that there is a security incident tied to this particular issue. So now we're knowing that this is something we need to address. And we can also see the coverage type based on this color code. So we see the color coordination from our legend. We can see here that we have some additional context around how we are going to navigate this Log4Shell storm, and we can understand some more information in terms of defensive measures. Now, for example, if I wanted to create this as my default view, it's very simple to do so by selecting our filters and going to make this my default view. This will now be the view for all of your security managers, your analysts, anyone who needs to have this particular view in their instance. That way you have this holistic overview of anything that pertains to the Log4Shell exposures. Now that we have all this information, we're going to get and hop into our major security incident management offering. Perfect. All right. So now that we're on this, this is going to be your new virtual war room. The offering here for major security management is to track and manage various activities that are particularly part of resolving a major security incident through MSIM, which is what you're seeing here in this general workspace dashboard. Now, through this workspace, you're going to have your incident managers, your SOC teams, your security managers, really all of the personas helping you track to propose and promote security incidents to a major security incident. This is going to track all of your activities. It's going to collaborate with all your colleagues, especially for those using Microsoft Teams and SharePoint Online. We have direct spokes and integrations that tie back into these major security incident management offerings, which again is going to give you better capabilities to work in conjunction with those existing security incident response products, as well as vulnerability response. So you have the best of both worlds. It's fantastic. It's the gift that keeps on giving. Now, once we've installed this in our instance, we're going to go ahead and propose the security incident. So as we mentioned before, here was our initial security incident. We've proposed and promoted this into our major security incident, and we're going to go ahead and dive right in. Now we're looking at the visibility for our workspace as a threat analyst persona. We have a dedicated workspace now for managing these major security incidents, specifically designed for the MSIM offering. Now, we're going to have all of the organization here because these visual task boards are going to automate the creation of collaboration folders, your chat communications, as well as archival parts of the process for your incident closure. So if you need to come back and gather this information for e-discoveries or for evidential purposes, all this information in terms of the workspace components are going to be here within your workspace. Now, this is a great workspace in general to go through all of the different areas to start automating the creation of your collaboration folders. So first and foremost, the incident impact. Right away, I know exactly what needs to be looked at. I have my affected assets that have been captured, my affected users, and of course, my affected locations. If someone were to ask me, what teams are working on this? Well, I know Lauren and Nazer are working on this as well. So first and foremost, we have our Apache support group. We have 5 active team members working around the clock to make sure that we have resolution by when? Well, 1 day from now, we have a resolution date. So we have that visual task board card indicating the time for resolution and our SLAs, and also the time since this incident had started. So we have all this relevant information in one single view. All of our other relevant teams are listed here as our assignment groups. And we can also see specific trends by groups, giving you another visualization. Scrolling down here, we have specific response tasks for our security incident response teams. And of course, we have additional information around major security incident tasks that are tied to the parent ticket, I should say. And of course, any type of external collaboration or trends by activity. This could include any file activity or chat activity within Microsoft Teams or SharePoint Online. So let's go ahead and look at the details of this particular major security incident record. All right. So as we can see here, we can add additional attachments if we need to add some additional log information. But of course, we want to make this as collaborative as possible. So leveraging that deep integration and partnership with Microsoft, and leveraging that ecosystem, you can actually go through the collaboration effort through your SharePoint Online folders, automatically creating those folders and ingesting all that information. Now that we have all of our incident information, we can obviously see all of the relevant context to understand what this particular Microsoft incident is about. So in this case, we have an unpatched vulnerability for Log4j. Critical vulnerability response has detected this through our VR offering. We have our incident managers, our assignment groups, our developers, our vulnerability analysts. Everyone is assigned. It's all hands on deck to go through and understand how we remediate this particular incident. On the right-hand side, we can compose our notes. We also have a complete activity stream of everything that has happened in relation to this major incident record. Now, as we go over to the collaboration, this is my favorite part because again, as I mentioned before, this is going to automatically go through and ingest the SharePoint Online folders as well as the creation of those logs. Here we can see Margaret Jones has uploaded 2 firewall logs from Zscaler. And now we've gone ahead and gone into the repository and she's posted that in the mitigations folder. Now, of course, it's one team, one dream. So we have our legal teams involved in this security chat channels. We also have our developer teams, and we also have the Apache team working on this as well. So What have we done there to make sure we have complete centralized focus control and collaboration? Well, we've created a chat channel manager directly through your Microsoft Teams. Mind blown. Look at all of these different teams that are handling all these different issues, right? We have a general public team, our technical teams, vulnerability assessment, the executive, legal, and network security teams. Now we have a way to capture this information, as you see here on the right-hand side, the activity stream, capturing all the relevant information for this major security incident record, giving us the ability to now streamline all relevant information, the tactics, the techniques, our procedures, the processes, the logs, everything is now in one collaborative space versus the latter, right? Separate private team chats, we have spreadsheets, we have siloed processes and operations, and we're trying to aggregate all this data from everywhere. Well, those days are gone. Those are very legacy processes. Let's get here into the future of Microsoft's, or in this case, major security incident management side of things, by now engaging in specific tasks that are assigned to this major security incident. Now it takes you through the entire process, right? We have some specific tasks here that are assessing any malware attacks or vulnerable codes, right? So we talk through that, understanding the log4shell versions within the CMDB. We're applying network mitigations. We have a couple of things in progress for those active vulnerabilities that Nazar went through as well. And then we have some closed tasks here that are in review and in a contain stage. Everything here is in your virtual war room. So we have the ability to go back and see this archival tracking as part of the incident closure. Now, of course, as I mentioned before, all of the incidents have an impact. So who's impacted? Well, because we have vulnerability response and ITOM around the discovery side, as well as our CMDB, we've enriched this data. So we have it, we're going to use it, right? The data is only good as what you use. So we're going to use this data here in our configuration items. Here are all of our affected assets and the vulnerability numbers, as well as who it's assigned to. We can also look at the affected locations. This again drills down and shows you our affected locations. And then last but not least, all of the affected users. So we know exactly who we need to reach out to, whether that's in a manual capacity, or in this case, we can automate that through a flow. Looking at our linked security incident responses here, we can see our record is tied back to that suspicious process around an exploit attempt, right? So we have all of our security incidents linked directly to the major security incident in question. So we take the guesswork out of finding where this record exists and simply go into this particular tab, giving us all that relevant information. And as I mentioned before, we also have threat intelligence as an offering. So going back to the initial Mitre fighter attack methodology, we have all of these indicators available, right? These tools are here to help us. So now that we have these assisted tools, we can also ingest those threat feeds, and all of that relevant information is going to be tied back to that link to security incident, and all relevant information here is seen here through the indicators, as well as our observables. So all this information, this rich contextual information, is helping us become better, faster, stronger, more efficient. At the end of the day, cybersecurity is a shared responsibility. So how about a timeline? Boom, there's the timeline. How about point in time resolution? What happened during this particular time frame? Well, it looks like we had an outbound traffic monitoring activated on the firewall, and it was created by our system administrator. Fantastic. That's good information to know. As a CISO, as an executive analyst, as a SOC manager, these are point in time snapshots that I need to be aware of in order to be successful and make sure that my SOC teams are operating at full capacity. It's full steam ahead. So we need to understand where things are happening at what times. And we have these specific range details, as well as a legend indicating different ranges in terms of your draft, analysis, contain, eradicate, right? Following that NIST protocol, right? We follow the NIST 800-61 incident handling response protocols and procedures. This is giving you the guidance. These are the tools you have, and everything here is out of the box. So we're giving you everything you need to navigate this Log4j storm. Now, as I mentioned before, it is a shared responsibility, right? It boils down to the fact that the more systems we secure, the more systems we can cure, right? These symptoms are systematic. Everything here is systematic, what we've shown you today. And so by providing you these offerings, by engaging on all of these different offerings in this better together story, we're able to go through and create a full end-to-end solution around the Log4shell exposures that we've been seeing here day in and day out. Now with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. We are just here to go through a couple of questions and answer any other questions you might have. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up our chat, see, and we have any questions here.
Yeah, Chris, I think there is one from Scott in our Q&A panel, and folks, feel free to add your questions now to the chat or that Q&A box, and we can answer them live. So for folks listening in on the recording, the question from Scott was, can we have the file discovery tool that we talked about at the front of the presentation target specific files, or will it return all files it sees? That's a great question. The answer to that is when you're setting up, when you're configuring that file-based discovery, once you get that plugin requested activated, you'll actually be able to set either specific file paths to discover or ignore, and then respectively, you can add an extension exclusion list or an extensions to specifically target. So you can really specify if you want to narrow that file list down that Discovery is looking for. Thanks for the question.
Yes, excellent question. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for that response, Lauren. Let's see if we have any other questions here.
Chris, I know you had a link that you wanted to throw in the chat. Do you want to throw that PDF link in there?
Oh, excellent call. Let me go ahead and do that here.
Another question coming in. We will absolutely be sharing the link to this recording as well as the deck and any materials we've sent out. Absolutely.
Perfect. And I'm going to go ahead and share out a link here. This is a Log4Shell solutions briefing that also provides everything we discussed today on today's webinar discussion. It's also going to tap into other methodologies and other modules that we provide out of ServiceNow's offering in relation to the Log4Shell exposure. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat for everyone. Feel free to use that internally for your collateral, your business table conversations. Anyone and everyone have access to this within the community. So you'll be able to use that and have that discussion internally in terms of how to move forward with any general demo discussions you'd like to have. We're happy to schedule more sessions and make sure that everyone is getting the most value out of all of the offerings we've gone through today. Just to recap, we've gone through IT operations, so our ITOM offering. We've also gone through the vulnerability response side and security incident response as part of our SecOps offering. So we are all happy to go through that as well. And that link is there as a collateral resource for you.
Perfect. Well, I'm not seeing any additional questions come in either through the chat or the Q&A. I think we can hang on for a few more moments if there's any questions that trickle in, but I think on behalf of all of us, we appreciate everybody coming to this webinar. Thank you so much for sharing your morning or afternoon with us. And Chris, you want to close us out?
Sounds good to me. Thank you everyone so much. I want to obviously thank my Log4j Dream team here, Nazer, Lauren, everyone on the call, all of our clients, our customers. We love you. Please stay safe. Make sure you secure all of your solutions with ServiceNow. We are happy to facilitate future conversations and demonstrations. Thank you so much for this time, and we are signing off. Everyone have a great day.
Thanks all. Take care.
Everyone.